It is 1979, and in the basement of the University of Massachusetts Medical Center, a molecular biologist is sitting cross-legged on the floor. His name is Jon Kabat-Zinn. He is 35 years old. Around him sit a dozen chronic pain patients, people whose doctors have run out of options. Bad backs, fibromyalgia, nerve damage that does not respond to medication. They have been referred here because there is nowhere else to send them. Kabat-Zinn is about to teach them something very old, something that was first spoken in a forest in northern India, roughly 2,500 years ago, to a small group of monks who had given up everything, their homes, their families, their names, to sit at the feet of a man they believed had seen the nature of reality itself. But Kabat-Zinn will not mention that man. He will not say the word Buddha. He will not use the Pali term that the original teaching was built around, a word called sati, saishti, because he knows that if he does, the doctors will stop referring patients. The hospitals will shut the door. So he strips the teaching down. He removes the robes. He removes the cosmology. He removes the ethics. He removes the path. And what remains, he calls mindfulness-based stress reduction. It works. It works so well that within 20 years, there will be over 800 peer-reviewed studies confirming its effects. Mindfulness will enter schools, prisons, corporate boardrooms, the United States military, and eventually, your phone. You have almost certainly used it. You may be using it right now, but here is the thing. Almost nobody tells you. The Pali word sati, the word at the center of all of this, does not mean paying attention. That is the modern definition. The one you will find in every app, every bestseller, every TED Talk. The original word means something else entirely. Something that changes what this practice was actually designed to do. We will get to that. But first, you need to understand what the Buddha actually taught, because this is not a story about meditation apps. This is not a story about relaxation. This is not a story about clearing your mind. This is a story about a 2,500-year-old technology for the human mind that got taken apart piece by piece. And whether the pieces still work when you separate them from the whole, to understand what mindfulness really is, you have to go back to the place where it was first described. Not a meditation studio, not a wellness retreat, a forest. The text is called the Satipatthana Sutta. Say it like Sati Pat Ta Na Sutta. And it is one of the most important discourses in the entire Pali canon. The Buddha delivered it to a group of monks in the Kuru country, a region in what is now northern India. His attendant Ananda was there. Ananda, who had spent 25 years at the Buddha's side, who had heard every teaching, who had a memory so precise that after the Buddha's death, he would recite entire discourses, word for word, so they could be preserved. If you are hearing this teaching today, in any form, in a monastery, in a hospital on your phone at 2 in the morning, it is because Ananda remembered it. The Buddha opened with a line that should stop you cold. He said, "This is the direct path for the purification of beings, for the overcoming of sorrow and lamentation, for the disappearance of pain and grief, for the reaching of the right way, for the realization of nibbana. Read that again. He did not say, this is a nice technique for managing your stress. He did not say, this will help you focus better at work. He said this is the direct path, one path, for the complete ending of suffering. And then he laid out what that path looked like. Not one instruction, four foundations, 4 areas of experience you train yourself to observe, in sequence with increasing depth. The first foundation is the body. You start with your breath. You feel the air entering your nostrils, filling your lungs, leaving again. But you do not stop there. You observe your posture, standing, sitting, walking, lying down. You observe the body as a collection of parts. You observe the body as something that will decompose. This is not relaxation. This is investigation. The second foundation is feeling. And here, you need to be careful because the Pali word vedana does not mean emotion. It means the raw tone of any experience, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. Every single moment of your conscious life has one of these 3 flavors. You stub your toe, unpleasant. You taste coffee, pleasant. You stare at a wall, neutral. The Buddha asked you to notice this tone before you react to it, before the craving kicks in, before the aversion kicks in, before you do anything at all. This is where it gets remarkable. What the Buddha described in the 5th century BCE is almost exactly what cognitive behavioral therapy calls cognitive diffusion, the ability to separate an experience from your automatic response to it. The psychologists arrived there in the 1960s. The Buddha was sitting with it 25 centuries earlier. The third foundation is mind. Not your thoughts, your mind state. Are you angry right now? Know that you are angry. Are you scattered? Know that you are scattered. Are you calm? Know that you are calm. No judgment, no fixing, just knowing. The fourth foundation is mental objects. The patterns, the habits, the structures that shape your experience, the 5 hindrances that keep pulling you off course, the 7 factors that lead to awakening. This is where sati stops being a technique and becomes a lens, a way of seeing the entire architecture of your own mind. Now, pay attention to this. The Buddha did not present these 4 foundations as a menu. He did not say, pick the one that works for you. He presented them as a sequence, a training. You start with the body because it is solid and obvious. You move to feeling because it is subtler. You move to mind because it is subtler. And you arrive at mental objects because by then, if you have done the work, you can see the machinery that runs your life. The cravings, the aversions, the stories you tell yourself at 3 in the morning. That is what the Buddha meant by mindfulness. Not pay attention to the present moment. That is step 1 of a 4-step system, and almost every popular presentation of mindfulness stops at step 1. Stay with me. So, how did this 4 foundation system, this complete technology for seeing through your own mind, end up as a 10-minute guided meditation on a phone app? The answer runs through 3 men and about 100 years. The first is Mahāsī, a Burmese meditation master, who, in the middle of the 20th century, took the Satipatthana method and simplified it for laypeople. He developed the noting technique. You sit, you breathe. And every time something arises in your awareness, you label it thinking, itching, hearing. It was precise. It was accessible, and it spread across Southeast Asia like fire. The second is S. In Goenka, an Indian Burmese businessman who learned Vipassana meditation and then gave up his business to teach it. He opened free 10-day retreats around the world. No charge, no religious requirement. He insisted the technique was non-sectarian, that it belonged to humanity, not to Buddhism. Thousands of Westerners encountered meditation for the first time. In one of Goenka's courses, many of them went on to become teachers themselves. The third is Kabat-Zinn, and Kabat-Zinn did something neither Mahāsī Sayadaw nor Goenka had done. He did not simplify the teaching. He did not make it non-sectarian. He made it medical. He put it in a hospital. He published clinical data. He gave it a name that had no Eastern flavor at all. Mindfulness-Based Stress Reduction. And he got insurance companies to cover it. He later called MBSR the Trojan horse, his words. He meant that the Dharma was hidden inside a clinical wrapper, and once people started practicing, they would eventually find their way to the deeper teaching on their own. But here is what most people miss. A Trojan horse only works if someone opens the door to the city on the other side. And for millions of people who downloaded Headspace or Calm or Insight Timer, no one ever told them there was a city on the other side. So here is the question that sits at the center of this whole story. If you take a teaching that was designed as a complete path, a path that includes ethics, intention wisdom, effort, concentration, and mindfulness working together, and you pull out just the mindfulness piece, just the attention piece, just the notice your breath piece, is what you are holding still, the Buddha's teaching. Or is it something else entirely? If you are watching this and you have never heard sati explained this way, if you thought mindfulness was just being present, then you are exactly who this channel is for. Subscribe to Dharma, made simple. We go back to what the Buddha actually said, not what the internet thinks he said. And what he actually said is almost always more interesting, because the answer to this question, is mindfulness Buddhist, is not what you think, and it is not what most Buddhist teachers will tell you either. There is a detail in the Buddha's teaching that almost never makes it into the popular conversation about mindfulness, and it changes everything. The Buddha did not teach mindfulness. He taught sammā-sati, sammā-sati, right mindfulness. And that word, right, is doing more work than you think. In the Eightfold Path, the Buddha's complete framework for ending suffering, every factor has the prefix samā. Right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. 8 factors, they work together. They were never meant to be separated. The way you would never pull one wheel off a car and call it transportation. And here is the part that should make you uncomfortable. If there is right mindfulness, then there must be wrong mindfulness. And the Buddha knew this. Think about it. A sniper lying on a rooftop is extraordinarily mindful. His attention is locked on the present moment. His breathing is controlled. His awareness is sharp. He is not judging his experience. He is simply observing. By every definition you will find in a modern mindfulness app, that sniper is practicing mindfulness. The Buddha would have disagreed, because the Buddha's mindfulness was never value neutral. It was never just paying attention without judgment. It included a quality that the modern movement has almost entirely dropped, a Pali word called Sampajañña. Sampajañña. It means clear comprehension. Clear comprehension of what? Of purpose, of suitability, of whether what you are about to do is wholesome or unwholesome, helpful or harmful, leading toward freedom or leading toward more entanglement. Sati without Sampajañña is a flashlight. You can see where you are. Sati with Sampajañña is a compass. You can see where you are and whether you are heading in a direction worth going. The modern mindfulness movement kept the flashlight. It left the compass on the table. And this is where the debate gets heated. In 2019, a professor named Ronald Purser published a book. The title was one word, McMindfulness. His argument was sharp and uncomfortable. He said that corporate mindfulness, the kind taught at Google, at Goldman Sachs, at military bases, had taken a practice designed for liberation and turned it into a productivity tool, a way to make employees more focused, more resilient, more able to tolerate toxic work environments without complaining. He called it the perfect ideology for late capitalism. Stress is not caused by unjust systems. The message goes, stress is caused by your inability to manage your own mind. Here, breathe, feel better, good. Now, get back to work. You can disagree with Purser. Many people do Thich Nhat Hanh, the Vietnamese Zen master who spent 60 years teaching mindfulness in the West. Put it more gently. He said that mindfulness is like a knife. It can be used to cut vegetables or to hurt someone. The practice itself is neutral. The intention behind it is not, but you cannot deny that the question Purser raised is the same question the Buddha raised 25 centuries earlier. Mindfulness for what? Attention in service of what? The Buddha's answer was specific: in service of sila, ethical conduct; in service of pañña, wisdom; in service of seeing through the patterns that keep you trapped; in cycles of craving and aversion and confusion; not in service of quarterly earnings. Now, watch what happens next. There is a story in the Samyutta Nikaya, the Connected Discourses, called the Saddaka Sutta. The Buddha tells a parable about two acrobats, a master and an apprentice. They perform together on a bamboo pole, one balancing on top of the other. The master says to the apprentice, "You watch over me, and I will watch over you. That way, we will both be safe." The apprentice says something unexpected. She says, "No, that is not how it works. You look after yourself, and I will look after myself. That is how we will both be safe." And the Buddha says the apprentice is right. But then he adds something most people miss. He says, looking after yourself You look after others, looking after others. You look after yourself. And the way you look after yourself, he says, is through satipatthana, the 4 foundations of mindfulness. Do you see what he did? He took what sounds like a solo practice. Sit on your cushion. Watch your breath. Observe your mind, and he turned it inside out. He said, when you truly see your own patterns, your own reactivity, your own automatic habits of craving and pushing away, you stop inflicting those patterns on the people around you. Your mindfulness is not for you. It moves through you into every relationship, every conversation, every decision. This is the piece the apps miss entirely. Not because they are bad, not because they are lying to you, but because you cannot fit this into a 10-minute guided session between your morning coffee and your commute. This is not a technique, it is a way of being in the world, and that distinction between a technique you use and a way you live, the line, is the fault line that runs through the entire modern mindfulness conversation. If you are still here, if this is changing how you think about something you do every day, or something you have been meaning to start, hit subscribe right now. The next video goes even deeper. Now we go back to the word itself. The word that started all of this sati, every mindfulness app, every best-selling book, every corporate wellness program defines sati the same way, paying attention to the present moment. And that definition is not wrong, but it is incomplete in a way that matters. Because the Pali word sati does not come from a root that means to pay attention. It comes from the verb sar, and sar means to remember. Sit with that for a moment. The word at the center of the global mindfulness movement, a movement built entirely around present moment awareness, is rooted in the concept of memory, not memory as in, I remember what I had for breakfast. Memory as in, I remember to come back. I remember what I am doing and why I am doing it. I remember in the middle of an argument that the next words out of my mouth have consequences. I remember when the craving arises, that I have been here before, and I know where this road leads. I remember in the moment when everything in me wants to react, to grab, to push away, to check out, that I have a choice. That is sati, not the absence of thought, not the calm, passive observation of your breath. It is the act of remembering yourself back into wakefulness, over and over 1,000 times a day. You forget, you remember, you forget again, you remember again. That is the practice. The forgetting is not failure. The remembering is the practice. And this is where the teaching turns. In 1890, almost a century before, Kabat-Zinn walked into that hospital basement. An American psychologist named William James sat at his desk at Harvard and wrote a sentence that could have come directly from the Satipatthana Sutta. He wrote, "Nemert, the faculty of voluntarily bringing back a wandering attention over and over again is the very root of judgment, character, and will. Voluntarily bringing back a wandering attention over and over again. That is sar, that is the root of sati." James did not know the Pali Canon. He had never sat a Vipassana retreat, but he saw the same thing the Buddha saw. that the ability to come back, to return to remember where your attention is and redirect it, is not a relaxation technique. It is the foundation of your entire moral life, because you cannot choose wisely if you do not know what you are doing. And you cannot know what you are doing if your mind is somewhere else. Here is what the science shows. Sarah Lazar at Harvard ran a study in 2005 that found something startling. People who practiced mindfulness meditation for an average of 40 minutes a day showed measurably thicker cortical tissue in brain regions associated with attention, interoception, and sensory processing. 8 weeks. That is all it took. The brain physically changed shape. Richard Davidson at the University of Wisconsin took it further. He studied long-term meditators, Tibetan monks with 10,000, 20,000, 50,000 hours of practice, and found that their brains operated differently at rest. Their default mode network, the part of your brain that fires when you are not doing anything, the part that generates the endless self-referential chatter, the "what should I have for dinner? Why did she say that to me? What if I lose my job?" loop. That network was quieter. Not gone quieter. As if someone had turned down the volume on the voice in your head that never stops talking. And this is what is remarkable. Even the stripped-down version, the version without the ethics, without the path, without the Pali, physically changes your brain. Kabat-Zinn's Trojan horse works. The secular seed grows, but the Buddha was not trying to change your brain. He was trying to change your life. The cortical thickness is a side effect. The quieter default mode network is a side effect. What the Buddha was after was something the fMRI cannot measure. The moment when you see clearly and without flinching that the thing you have been chasing your entire life will not make you free. And instead of looking away from that truth, you stay with it. You let it do its work. That is what sammā-sati was designed for. Not stress reduction, not better focus, not a calmer morning commute. Freedom, the kind of freedom that does not depend on your circumstances getting better. The kind that comes from no longer needing them to. So, is mindfulness actually Buddhist? The answer is not yes. It is not no. It is not. It depends on who you ask. The answer is this. What the modern world calls mindfulness is a seed that was taken from a tree. The seed is real. It germinates. It grows. The science proves this, but if you have only ever held the seed, you have never seen the tree, and the tree, the full teaching of sati, with Sampajañña beside it, with the Eightfold Path around it, with 25 centuries of people who sat with it and tested it and found that it worked. The tree is something else entirely. You do not have to be Buddhist to plant the seed. You do not have to be Buddhist to water it. But if you want to know what the tree looks like when it is fully grown, you have to go back to the person who first described it. And that person was a man sitting in a forest in northern India, speaking to a small group of monks, with Ananda listening and remembering every word, so that 25 centuries later, you could hear it too. 3 things to carry with you. First, mindfulness, as the modern world knows, It is a deliberate adaptation. Jon Kabat-Zinn took the Buddha's teaching on sati, removed the Buddhist vocabulary, removed the ethical framework, removed the path, and placed what remained inside Western medicine. He did this on purpose. He did it because he knew the hospitals would not accept it otherwise. And it worked. The clinical evidence is overwhelming, but what you get from an app or an 8-week MBSR course is the first foundation of a 4-foundation system. It is real. It is useful. It is not the whole teaching. Second, the next time you sit down to practice, whether that is on a cushion, in a chair, or on a train with your earbuds, try adding the one element the Buddha considered essential and the modern movement left behind. Sampajañña, clear comprehension. Before you close your eyes, ask yourself, what am I doing this for? And when a feeling arises, pleasant, unpleasant, neutral, ask yourself not just, what am I feeling? But, what is this feeling asking me to do? And is that action wholesome? That single question is the difference between stress reduction and liberation. You do not need a monastery. You do not need a teacher. You do not even need to call it Buddhist. You just need the question. Third, the Buddha did not teach mindfulness, so you could perform better at work. He did not teach it so you could sleep better. He did not teach it so you could lower your blood pressure or reduce your cortisol levels. Though it does all of those things, he taught it because he believed that you, specifically you, hearing this right now, have the capacity to see through every story your mind tells you. Every craving that whispers, this will finally be enough. Every aversion that says, if I could just get rid of this, I would be happy. Every moment of autopilot where you go through an entire day without once being fully present for your own life. He believed you could wake up from that. Not once, not in some dramatic flash of enlightenment, but over and over, breath by breath, in the quiet, ordinary moments where no one is watching and nothing is at stake except the quality of your own attention. That is sati, not a product, not a brand, not an app, a remembering, the oldest kind there is. Do you practice mindfulness? And if you do, has it ever changed not just how you feel, but how you ACT? I want to hear your story. Tell me in the comments. If this gave you something you did not have before you pressed play, hit like subscribe to Dharma. Made simple. Share this with someone who meditates, but has never heard the word. Sati explained, and hit the bell, because the next one goes deeper still.